Um, this will be kind of quick and sweet, so let's go ahead and get started. Introduction. So, you've been working on this project. It's been weeks, months, maybe a year or two. Hopefully not that long, but you're excited to roll out this new system. And before you roll it out, you've done kind of your due diligence. You've tested it. You've made sure that it solves a problem. You've vetted the problem that you're solving. And I have a question to pose for you. So first, imagine that, yes, you're about to release this project that you've been working on. And a question for you is, have you thought about how to actually make sure your system is up and running? How many people have actually answered this question before they've released a project? Does what? Praying? And hoping and praying does not count. Yeah, no, it's a good clarifying question. So kind of from the lack of hands in the audience, I would say that most people don't, and that's totally okay. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to go over some definitions, some terminology relating to monitoring. And then I will focus my discussion using the lens of two questions. I know everyone's like, what are those two questions? Yeah, I know, super exciting. How do you know your system is working as expected? So this is the first question. And then kind of a corollary is, how do you pinpoint the issues when it's not? Yeah, let those soak in. Okay, awesome. First, definitions. Can anyone give me a definition for monitoring? This is audience participation. Anything? Definition, example, smiles. Yeah, exactly. So kind of said in a more broader sense, it gives you visibility into your system. And giving visibility can be like uptime, it could be metrics, things like that. Because I guess when you're releasing your baby into the wild, right? Your project, you need to know that it's actually working and what's actually happening in the system. And monitoring helps you do that. So what does monitoring look like? What are some concrete examples? We heard uptime and metrics. It can also look like dashboards, right? I'm sure every company has like kind of a TV of like all the graphs, right? That's also monitoring. And kind of the specifics of monitoring I'm going to go into today are, first one is metrics, second one is logging, and third one is alerts. So first one, metrics. Can anyone give me an example of a metric? Response time, yep, that's a metric. Sorry, I didn't hear what you were going to say. Spew? Spew time? Oh, CPU, okay. Yeah, that's another one. CPU usage. So very generally, metrics are a number, right? They give you some aggregate quantitative data. So there were already some mentioned. You have CPU usage. You can have maybe a number of occurrences of some event. Or you can have some response time, so some timing. Okay, so we have metrics down. What's the second one? Logging. Can anyone give me a definition or an example of logging? Or what is logging? Or an example of logging? It's hard. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so it gives you detailed data about what is actually happening in your system. You record these messages into a log file. Usually that's what happens. So recording kind of a system's events into a file. And finally, alerts. I'm sure everyone has experience with alerts. It's probably those things that you ignore in your email. So alerts notify you when some criteria is met. Usually that means that something is wrong and you need to go investigate it, right? So alerts can notify you via email, call, text, PagerDuty, app. Yeah, so those are the definitions. I'll take a moment to let you soak it in. It's beautiful. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to the questions. So the first question, who remembers what the first question was? What? What is my, okay. Okay. Maybe the second question I asked. But how do you know your system is working as expected? So let's look at it. So the way I like to think about it is I like to define a success metric. And it's what it sounds like. It's a metric or a criteria that needs to be met in order for me to say, yes, this is a success, right? So what does that actually mean? It means I have a goal, right? Every project you do, every feature you put out, there's a goal for that product, for that feature. So kind of an example here is, so I work at a company called Deliverr. They do fulfillment as a service. And what that means is that when you order an item online, right? Everyone does online shopping. I'm not the only one. Yeah? Okay. So from the time that you press checkout to the time that item arrives at your door, that entire process is called fulfillment. So let's define a success metric for fulfillment. So an order should be processed within some time. Can anyone tell me why this is not a good success metric? It's not concrete, it's not detailed. So let's make it more specific. An order should be processed within 12 hours of the order creation time. Much more specific, much more measurable, right? Let's just ignore the should be processed part. But yeah, it's more specific, and then we actually can create a metric from that success criteria. So let's say the order process time minus the order creation time is less than 12 hours. Everything making sense? If you understand what I'm saying, raise your hand. Uh-oh, I see some non-raised hands. Okay. Okay, so I have this metric. It's awesome, right? I have a success metric. I release my project. I monitor it, right? Maybe I have like a cool little graph that shows me, oh, this is like the processing time of all my orders, right? But that's probably not a very sustainable way to monitor my metric, right? What if I have 3 more projects, right, with kind of 20 more metrics to monitor? That's not sustainable, and no one really wants to be looking at graphs all the time. So what should I do? I should put an alert on it. Get it? Like put a ring on it? Okay. Beyonce fans. Okay, so put an alert on it. So what I would do is I would just set a threshold on the metric. My example is really simple, right? Less than 12 hours or more than 12 hours, I should be notified, right? Because my success metric is no longer achieved. So alerts. Let's talk a little bit more about alerts. When an alert fires, it should equate to the system is not working in some capacity. I know that you probably have experienced a lot of spammy alerts where you just ignore them, but we want to make sure that our alerts are actionable. So what kind of will help us do that? One is we should provide some context about why the alert was created in the first place. What is a success metric that this alert is supposed to be kind of observing and representing? And then the second one, which is probably more important, is there should be a playbook or next steps for every single alert. So that means that either These next steps will solve the issue that the alert is monitoring, or it will give the person some guidance to see what to investigate, where to investigate, to kind of make progress towards resolving the alert. So let's say that we have kind of, we live in a system or in a company where you have thousands of alerts, right? And they're really spammy because you just kind of filter them out of your inbox, right? So how do you get to a kind of a state of a system where instead of having thousands of spammy alerts that maybe don't mean anything, into kind of a system where you have several meaningful alerts, right? How do you go from thousands of spammy ones to several meaningful alerts? And I would say that a good way to kind of make this transition is with every alert that you receive, you should kind of understand kind of what is it trying to monitor, what is the success metric, and if you can't come up with a success metric, then maybe you should turn off the alert. Or if you don't, so if if the alert doesn't point to a specific issue, also turn it off, right? If it's necessary, you can turn it back on. But kind of that's maybe one way to go from state of spammy alerts to alerts that are meaningful. Okay, second question, how do you figure out what is wrong? So you've been alerted, right? You've been alerted, that's great. And utilize logging, I'm sure this is a bit of common sense here, but logging helps you trace what is happening at a specific time during the execution path. And one thing that is helpful is logging some unique identifier for that execution path. Yeah, so I was going to go into an example, but I'm not sure I have time. But let's see. So very simply, without getting into the details, I have kind of some expectations, some success criteria. When a user leaves a team, they should no longer have access to team content. So for example, when I left Dropbox, I shouldn't be able to see secret IPO plans, right, anymore. And the problem is that this is not happening. This criteria is not being met. So investigating, I used kind of the logs to follow the decisions made when migrating content. And then I pinpointed the issue. I think this is very familiar to a lot of you. But yeah, okay, cool. So, and then a slight tangent. Logging is not only useful for kind of figuring out what's wrong, but it's also helpful to test, in a way, verify dangerous operations. So let's say I wanted to delete a bunch of user data. It might be better to first log it, verify that what I expect is supposed to happen happens, and then actually let the database operations go through. Okay, summary. So today we answered 2 questions. What was the first question? You answered this before. Yeah, is your system working as expected? Great. Second question. What is monitoring? Wait, one more time? Yeah, exactly. How do you figure out what is wrong? Perfect. A+. Okay. So kind of my hope, my goal for this talk is that in your next project, you'll kind of you'll be proactive about incorporating monitoring into your project because it is vital for product maintainability. Thank you.